Maybe they set guards at every one of the places they wanted to protect. Maybe Fungus had personally chosen to keep an eye on the Obsidian, knowing just how vital their plans in the invasion of the overworld. Or maybe they just gotten lucky. Either way, they seemed awfully pleased with themselves, right up until Farnum slashed him with the shovel in Fungus's arm. Squealing in pain, the gigantic piglin let go of Farnum, then also flung him away, ensuring that he wouldn't just drop back onto the ground where the piglins would have a hard time extracting him, and where Kraton will still be hiding. Instead, Farnum went tumbling across the zoo's open floor and eventually came to rest against the gate of the Strider's pen. The animal nuzzled up against Farnum's then, as happy to see him as ever, hoping for a treat. Farnum wished that he'd been in a position to reward the Strider at that point, but it took everything he had to push himself to his feet instead. Fungus, which honestly seemed like a terrible name for such a terrifying creature, although perhaps it referred to the scent of the piglin's leader's breath, turned toward Farnum and let out a bellow of blind rage that curdled Farnum's blood. It seemed like the noise alone shook the whole of the world, and maybe that was just because it set Farnum trembling so hard. Despite desperate to escape, Farnum spun around and opened the gate he landed against. It came open easily, and he shoved his way in, right past the Strider, and ran. Fungus lumbered after him and stood there in the gateway for a moment, surveying the Strider's enclosure. To Farnum's great dismay, there was no way out of the place. He and his friends had built a tall and solid fence all the way around it, and a pool of molten lava lined its back wall. The only way out would be for Farnum to start digging, but he knew that it would take too long. The moment he started, Fungus would just rush over and grab him before he could get away. Still, he had to do something, try something, anything. That's when he saw the Strider coming at him, and a plan came to mind. It was a ridiculous and probably pointless plan, but if he was lucky, it could buy him enough time to come up with a better one. And at least it would be something other than waiting for the great Fungus to storm in and brain him. Farnum whistled for the Strider to hustle over to him, patting his thigh to keep its attention. The animal trotted right over, and without missing a beat, Farnum leaped off to his back. Fortunately, Grinchard had left their saddle on the creature's back, and Farnum could slip right into it. The explorer had also been experimenting with leading the Strider around with Ward Fungus dangling from the end of the fishing rod, and he left those atop the Strider as well. Luckily, to the creature's frustration, unfortunately, Farnum hadn't practiced riding the Strider much before, and he almost fell off the creature's other side. It took everything he had to hold on, and he dropped the shovel he'd been carrying in the process. When Fungus saw Farnum jump atop the Strider, they clearly knew that some sort of trick was coming, and they charged straight for the zookeeper as he tried to find a solid seat and a firm grip on the Strider. The gigantic piglin's snorting roar frightened the Strider and took off as if someone had jabbed it in the rear with a sword. As challenging as it made for Farnum to find a grip he was searching for, this turned out to be a good thing, as he kept both of them and the Strider out of the reach of Fungus's savage flail, which crashed into the ground behind them. Farnum was still struggling to ride himself atop the Strider, then sprinted straight into the pool of lava in the back of its pen. Under most circumstances, this might have stopped Farnum's heart, but in this case, he'd be planning to guide the Strider back to the pool anyhow. This only served to impress upon him how imperative it had he not let go. The Strider hauled up the halt, and then it reached the back of the enclosure, setting right at the far edge of the pool of lava, exactly where Farnum wanted it. With the animal not moving for a moment, he was able to ride himself atop it and get a firm grip on it, so he snatched up the fishing rod and Ward Fungus. As he did, he looked back across the lava to see Fungus standing there on the edge of the pool, glowering at himself in the Strider. The gigantic piglin reached out with their massive flail, testing the distance from themselves to Farnum. Although the zookeeper could feel the powerful breeze that Fungus swings generated, the head of the flail itself wound up well shy of him, much to his relief. Farnum resisted the urge to stick out his tongue at Fungus and taunted the piglin leader. While he might be safe from this direct blow from that awful flail at the moment, he didn't mean that he wouldn't throw the flail at Farnum instead. But it would only take a glancing blow to knock him off the Strider, or knock the Strider over, and he would be incinerated immediately. It was hot enough for Farnum sitting on the Strider's back. He couldn't imagine how the animal could withstand in contact with the molten rock, but it just rolled around on it all the time like it was nothing. In fact, it preferred to hang out on the lava, which kept it far warmer than any part of the enclosure could manage. Any other creature that Farnum knew would be burned into a crisp in an instant, and apparently that included Fungus. The piglin boss roared at Farnum from the edge of the lava pool, snorted all sorts of things that were surely so horrible that the zookeeper for once felt glad he couldn't understand the piglin tongue. He just hoped that Kraton could protect their ears. As Fungus berated Farnum, some of the braver piglins came up behind to cheer their leader and mock the trapped zookeeper's plight. The few of them carried crossbow, which sent severe fear through Farnum. As soon as they started firing arrows at him, he had to start moving. The lava wouldn't offer him any protection from their shots. Furious as Fungus was, though, the moment one of the piglins bumped up against them, the leader reached down, grabbed the gloating creature, and hurled him at Farnum. The horrified zookeeper hunkered down and clung to the Strider as tightly as he could, and the animal leaped inside from the incoming piglin. The poor warrior burst into flames. They landed and was reduced to ashes in an instant. The rest of the piglins gave Fungus a wide berth after that, keeping well clear of their leader's reach. The huge piglins roared again in frustration, but now none of the others rallied to their side to egg them on. Infuriated by the lack of support in their underlings, Fungus raised their golden flail over their head. Knowing that what was coming next, Farnum whipped and warped Fungus out right in front of Strider's nose, spurring it into action. The head of the flail on its chain came spinning at them in a flat circle, and it just barely missed them. It was close enough to mess up Farnum's hair as it skimmed over his head. It crashed into the far wall, knocking a hole in it before it tumbled into the lava and began to burn. Unfortunately, the hole in the wall was too far away for Farnum to reach it. He wasn't sure he could wriggle through it and get away anyhow. If he tried to leap for it and missed, he would certainly pay for this mistake with his life. Instead, he guided the Strider back on the spot of the pool of lava, and the farthest way outmost Fungus had listened to the leader rail against them once more. The rest of the piglins edged even farther away from the ruler's ridiculous fury, terrified of becoming entangled in it. Just as it seemed like Fungus had finally calmed down, which meant that they would really become dangerous to Farnum and the Strider, the second in command came up behind them, the one called Ugub. Fungus didn't notice Ugub at first. They were too engrossed in cursing Farnum and coming up with new ways to berate him. Fungus finally did hear Ugub chortling as they approached from behind, though. The leader turned to the last second and chewed out whoever was brave enough to give them the reach. That probably saved Fungus's life, but it wasn't enough to stop Ugub from laying into the leader with a cowardly attack. Ugub slammed into Fungus from behind, but because the leader had started to turn, it was only a glancing blow. Even that was enough to knock Fungus off balance, though, and send him staggering toward the lava pit. The leader stuck out one foot, steadying himself, and it landed in the lava. Flames instantly shot from the molten rock, setting the leader's leg ablaze. Rather than falling into lava, though, Fungus managed to shove himself away from the burning leg, and they tumbled backward onto the stones lying in the deadly pool. Their leg had been ruined, but they managed to knock the flames out by rolling on the ground before curling up into a tight ball and bellowing in excruciating pain. Ugub stood over injured Fungus then, raised a fist into the air, and snorted something that Farnum might have translated as, "Now I am the great Ugub." Thus the piglins hesitated for the briefest moment before they raised their weapons in the air and began to grunt in unison, "Ugub, Ugub, Ugub." Chapter 27. The Great Ugub. From the moment the Great Bungus dragged Farnum out of his tunnel, Crichton had not known what to do. Part of them wanted to crawl out of the hole, follow Bungus, and demand that they leave Farnum alone, but the advisor knew exactly how well that would go. Another part of them wanted to race back through the tunnel that Farnum just dug and see if they could scrabble their way back into the pen in which Farnum's injured friends were being held. Maybe the advisor could pretend that they had been in a pen the whole time, waiting for the Great Bungus to come and set things straight after Ugub had tossed Crichton in there, which Bungus would surely see had been a mistake. The most cowardly part of Crichton thought it might be best to just remain there in the tunnel, maybe a little bit farther back than in hopes that no one came in after them. Then, when things had calmed down a bit, they might be able to sneak up into the zoo and maybe slip through the obsidian portal and back into the nether where they belonged. No matter what, though, Crichton had long ago learned the hard way to interfere with the Great Bungus when they were in rage, so the advisor waited a bit to see what happened to Farnum. If Bungus killed the zookeeper quickly, that would probably put the leader in a good mood. If they decided to play with Farnum a bit beforehand, or maybe just toss him back into the pen after beating them senseless, Crichton might be able to talk to Bungus into showing mercy. But that would have to be later. Despite their fear of discovery, Crichton's curiosity got the better of them. They poked their head up out of the hole and saw that Farnum had done a far better job of guessing how far the dig than the advisor could have hoped. The chest of obsidian sat right there next to him, scant feet away. When Farnum managed to leap on the Strider to escape, Crichton couldn't help but silently cheer them for them, even if they knew this would probably mean a violent and painful end for them. When they managed to evade both the piglin and Bungus' massive flail hurled at them, the advisor couldn't believe their eyes. They had never seen anyone evade the Great Bungus' wrath for so long. And then Ugub ambushed Bungus from out of nowhere. Crichton lost suspected that Ugub would do their best to get rid of Bungus the first opportunity. That was when the piglin wave took power, and those who did that. Trouble for Ugub was Bungus was bigger and stronger than him. It didn't mean that Bungus had any of their cunning and ferocity over the years, and they had been in charge of their bastion. From piglins who would have been content to wait for age to weaken such a leader, for the years to humble them in the way that other piglins could not. But Ugub had never been all that patient. They had been looking for the chance to put an end to Bungus for years, and now have found out where they take it. Ugub was a coward, the kind who would attack their leader without warning from behind. But Crichton knew that those other piglins would never hold that against them. With Bungus out of the way, Ugub would take charge. None of the other piglins were anywhere close as tough or large as devious or enough to challenge him about it. Crichton had worked with Bungus for so long, had advised them since they were young, and they weren't prepared to see them fall. Mentally, they knew it would happen someday. In fact, they had decided they might have to take action to make that happen themselves. But emotionally, they didn't know how to deal with it. Something inside them broke when they saw Ugub knock Bungus into that lava pool, when they watched the leader's leg go up in flames. When Bungus rolled back onto the pool's shore, the remains of their limbs still smoldering. Dismay overtook Crichton at that point and threatened to swallow him whole. They found themselves emerging from the hole next to the obsidian without even realizing that their legs were moving. They simply pushed them up and out of the forward. At first, Crichton thought that they were moving toward Bungus for their longtime leader, their oldest friend, while the piglin leader had been brutalizing for years. They had at least understood each other, depended on each other. Sure, Bungus had banished the advisor from the bastion, but that hadn't stuck for long. Crichton had honestly never expected it to. Crichton knew, though, that life for them Ugub would be like most piglins' life, brutal and short. The traitor had affection for the advisor. Ugub would kill them and replace them with someone far duller, if they replaced them at all. Many piglin leaders refused to rely on advisors of any kind, thinking that listening to someone's opinion made them look weak, in a job in which weakness invited aggression. And that's why when Crichton realized that their legs weren't carrying them toward Bungus but Ugub, they were surprised at all. The day that Bungus might be over, the day Ugub hadn't quite begun. Not if Crichton could help it. Crichton drew the blade that they carried with them, the one that they kept hidden from Farnham, and even from Ugub when the brute had tossed him into a pen, and they marched straight up to the traitor. Ugub didn't even notice Crichton approaching. They were too busy gloating over the betrayal of Bungus and basking in the glory of having claimed leadership of the Piglin warriors. The other piglins, for their part, were too busy cheering for Ugub. It hadn't taken them long to recognize that Bungus was finished and Ugub would be in charge now. To make sure that the new leader didn't take them too, they made sure to cheer as loudly and obviously as they could. They probably all thought the Crichton was doing the same thing. Perhaps the advisor was marching up to prostrate themselves before Ugub and beg for mercy, which everyone knew they would never get. The best that the advisor was disgraced leader could hope for was a quick death. Crichton had higher hopes than that, but they depended entirely on Farnham stepping up and helping them out. The advisor hoped the zookeeper would figure it out fast, or they would both be doomed for sure, and the entire settlement along with them. Crichton kept their knife close to their chest, right up until they reached Ugub. Then, instead of kneeling in front of the celebrating the loot, they hauled the knife both up in their hands and brought it down hard, point first, right on top of Ugub's foot. The blade stabbed right through the brute's foot until it struck stone below it. The look of triumph on Ugub's face instantly transformed to one of agony, as Crichton hauled back to the blade. Ugub drew back their foot and began to hop away an uninjured limb, howling in pain. For a long moment, the rest of the piglins had no idea what had just happened. Ugub had looked so strong and in charge. To see the brute already injured and wailing took their faith in Ugub's ability to lead their people and instinctively recoiled it. Crichton did not waste any time. While Ugub hopped away from them, they pursued the brute with their knife, looking for another opening for a stab. The advisor also shouted out, "Farnham!" Plus one of the few other overworlders words that they thought they understood, probably because they heard Farnham muttering it to himself while confronting his fears. "Dig!" Farnham had been gawking at Crichton to that point, marveling at the advisor's bravery, or so Crichton hoped. Crichton couldn't see how someone their size taking on someone Ugub's size would impress an overworlder, but if the zookeeper didn't get moving right away, the act would turn out to be not one of bravery, but of stupidity. To their great delight, Crichton saw Farnham get the strider moving again, using some kind of strange contraption that dangled something in front of it. The animal launched forward, carrying the zookeeper from the relative safety of the lava pool and sprinting right toward the enclosure's wide-open gate. Then the strider reached the gate. Farnham leaned over and scooped up the iron shovel that he dropped where the great Bungus had flung him away. Farnham kept moving them, then, not even bothering to slow down. Crichton would have watched where they were going, but they already had their hands full with Ugub. After the initial shock from the attack had worn off, the brute had put their injured foot back on the ground and focused all their pain and rage toward the advisor. Every step on the foot caused them horrible agony, which they expressed with a furious snort that made Crichton shudder in fear. "You're going to die," Ugub bellowed at the advisor as they lumbered their direction. "I'm going to break you into tiny pieces and smash every bit of you flat." Crichton did the only thing they could do in other circumstances. They turned and fled. Which Ugub injured, Crichton thought they might actually have a chance to outrun the brute. Normally, it wouldn't have been much of a contest at all. The brute's legs were no longer faster than the advisor's, and Ugub would have caught Crichton in a matter of a few strides. Unfortunately, the best of the piglins saw that as well and leapt to give their most likely new leader a hand. Under other circumstances, most piglins would have stayed back and let their leader establish dominance by destroying their attacker. A few of them had started after Farnham, though, and now found themselves standing between Crichton, the gate the advisor was charging toward. They spun around and brandished their axes and crossbows, the advisor more in self-defense than anything else. When Crichton saw this, they peeled off to the side and avoided the direct confrontation with the piglins in the gateway. This is, however, kept them inside the pen, which gave Ugub a much better chance of catching them. If they wanted to keep out the brute's gas, they're going to have to move sharp and fast. Ugub roared at the others, "Don't you dare let the little traitor leave. I'll kill anyone who does." The rest of the piglins got a hint and joined in correlating Crichton away from the gate and toward Ugub. None of them would attack Crichton directly, or to do so would have been to cheat Ugub with a chance of revenge on the advisor, which would incur the brute's gratitude but the wrath. So they kept their distance from Crichton, but made it clear that the advisor came near them and would force them back into the center of the pen. While Crichton didn't appreciate being forced into close quarters with Ugub, they immediately saw how it would work in their advantage. If Farnham figured out what the advisor wanted them to do, then Crichton would need to defeat Ugub. With this all impossible anyhow, they needed to keep from being killed long enough for Farnham to complete this mission. "Go ahead, coward," Ugub snorted at Crichton. "Run all you want. Wear yourself out. You're going to get tired before I stop getting angry, then you're going to die." Chapter 28. The Pit and the Obsidian. Farnham had just about given up hope that he might survive the night when Crichton emerged from the tunnel he dug. After the piglins' earlier betrayal, he had assumed he couldn't count on any help from the quarter, so it heartened him to see the climb out of the hole, then not run in the other direction. Then, as Crichton and Ugub began to fight, Crichton had squealed something at him, something that none of the other piglins would be likely to understand. "Farnham, dig!" As Crichton said that, they pointed at the lava pool with a hole. Then they emerged from. No, to a stockpile of obsidians the piglins had brought with them from the nether. Farnham was entirely clear on what Crichton was telling him, but thinking back on how he and his friends had made the obsidian helped him figure it out. Using a part of water to cool the lava produced obsidian, but he had to be careful about how you extract the obsidian after that. If you weren't careful, the obsidian would fall back into the lava, which would melt it and destroy it. Farnham was literally riding on top of the source of the lava. If he could somehow dump the obsidian in it, he could destroy it all. But he didn't see a good way to do that. There was too many piglins standing between the chest of obsidian and the lava pool, including Ugub, who would kill him the moment they got the chance. Crichton had to hold him to bring the obsidian to the lava, though. They squealed, "Dig!" Farnham hadn't understood that at first. It wasn't like he could dig through the lava. It would kill him instantly. But he could dig through the underworld from the spot where the obsidian stockpile was, right next to the lava pool. If he could bring the obsidian to the lava, he could bring the lava to the obsidian instead. Of course, trying to do this while Ugub and the rest of the piglins invaders stomped around overhead would be a challenge. The only thing that would give him a bit of hope was how Crichton was keeping Ugub busy. The little piglin wouldn't be able to keep away from the brute forever, so Farnham would have to move fast. The moment Farnham reached the hole next to the obsidian stockpile, he leaped off the back of the strider and dove into it. Then, he set to work with a shovel. First thing he did was dig out a space directly beneath the stockpile, as he already knew he'd placed the lava to flow onto. He considered collapsing the entire stockpile into the pit he dug, and he decided against it, as he didn't want to raise the suspicions of Ugub and the other piglin warriors yet. With that done, Farnham poked his head up the surface to see how Crichton was faring against Ugub. It did not look good. The brute got their hands on Crichton and hauled them high through the air to choke the life out of the little piglin, who was kicking their feet like a man in a vain effort to hurt Ugub's arms. The rest of the piglins had gathered around Ugub to cheer their efforts and watch their new leader take a horrible and painful example out of Crichton. Farnham knew that he couldn't do anything about this. Crichton had betrayed them, and now was only using him to try to betray their new leader, too. The little piglin likely deserved everything that Ugub was about to do to them. But Farnham couldn't just watch and let that happen. As mad as he'd been at Crichton, their horrible duplicity, he couldn't just watch them be killed, no matter how appropriate it might be. Without thinking, Farnham climbed out of the hole and leaped atop the strider once more. "Go," he heard Micah calling from the distance. "Go save them." He heard the strider toward and charged toward Ugub, shouting as he went, "Drop that piglin! Drop Crichton, you brute! Drop my friend!" Ugub tore towards Farnham and stared at the zookeeper in utter disbelief. No piglin would go such lengths to save anyone, much less someone who betrayed them so badly. To the brute, it just didn't make sense. That's probably why Ugub wasn't ready for Farnham sped past the shocking piglin and smacked him in the face with the iron shovel. The attack surprised Ugub even more than Farnham's appearance. They toppled backward, dropping Crichton as they fell, and clutched at their face. Farnham held up short of the edge of the lava pool. For an instant, he considered going back to Crichton, scooping them up and riding off with them in the top of the strider. But he knew that he would get away wouldn't be enough. He had something else to do first. Without even getting out the strider, Farnham started digging. At first, he went straight down, just far enough to get both himself and the strider on the ground. The lava began to flow in behind him, and it grew almost unbearably hot. If he had not been on top of the strider, the molten rock would certainly have burned him to a crisp. Once he was deep enough, Farnham began digging underground toward a stockpile of obsidian. He worked as fast as he could, moving forward as he went, watching the lava continue to flow behind him. By this time, Uggup had recovered from the blow in their face, and was snorting loudly enough to shake the walls of the tunnel. Farnham was digging. Then, while Farnham continued to burrow through the ground, he heard the sound of digging happening above him. The roof of the tunnel he'd been digging opened up and let light in. He glanced back and saw that Uggup had dug their way into the tunnel from above, searching for Farnham and hoping to kill him. Farnham was at the digging in renewed vigor. He knew that if Uggup managed to catch up with him, he'd be finished for sure. There was always a chance that Uggup would figure out where Farnham was headed and try to head him off before he got there. The only hope the zookeeper had was that Uggup wasn't quite that clever. Not that Farnham had any other options left. The roof of the tunnel behind him disappeared again and again and again as Uggup dug through it, searching for him. Each time the root bellowed in disappointment and fury, and each time Farnham kept digging harder. As Farnham went, his arms grew more and more tired, and the strider became more scared, harder to control. He knew he could last longer, but stopping there could mean certain death. By the time Farnham reached the pit, he dug beneath the obsidian stockpile. His arms felt like they were made of stone, almost too heavy to lift. When he broke into the pit again, he almost cried in relief. Despite that, he kept the strider moving as the lava was flowing in the light behind him. He heard the mighty snort that Uggup broke through the ground above once again. This time, though, the brute was no longer staring into the lava-filled tunnel, but into the pit. Being a much larger cavity below it seemed to cause Uggup to follow in frustration. Perhaps the brute thought that Farnham had found a cave to hide in, which would make finding the zookeeper nearly impossible. Farnham hoped that Uggup would leap down into the pit to see for himself, but the brute was apparently too canny for that. Instead, for waiting for Uggup to figure out a way to reach them, Farnham worked his way around the edge of the pit, knocking out the ceiling above him as he went. He felt like he could barely move his arms, but it was easy going. Rather than chirping away the solid earth, he needed to remove the layer of gravel overhead, so that he could reach the chests above and break them, sending their contents into the lava below. Farnham had always gotten all the way around the pit when the ceiling in front of him disappeared. Suddenly, Uggup had finally figured out the pattern of what Farnham was doing underground and decided to get in front of him and stop it. Trouble was that, by doing so, Uggup had taken out the last remaining bit of edge of the pit ceiling. Rather than catching Farnham, the brute had knocked out the final bit of the gravel ceiling support, and the entire roof of the pit plummeted into the lava below. This took all of the chests of obsidian that Piglins had brought with him to Overworld, destroying every last bit of it. A couple of Piglin warriors who had been trying to protect the chests of obsidian tumbled into the lava with them. Farnham felt horrible for them, and given the chance, he would have pushed the strider headlong into the now filled lava pit and tried to save them, whether there was wisdom in that or not. But Uggup didn't give them that chance. With the roof of the pit entirely gone, the Piglin brute could see Farnham clearly now, so they reached down and plucked Farnham straight out of the strider's back. The zookeeper had done his best to evade Uggup, but before he could turn the strider around, he found himself in the Piglin leader's grasp. Farnham struggled as he lifted in the air, trying to work his fingers in beneath Uggup's meaty hand and pry himself loose. Uggup was just too big, too fast, and too strong, though, and no matter how hard Farnham tried to work his exhausted arms, he couldn't prevail. If he had forever, Farnham might have been able to figure something out, but Uggup cocked back their arm and tried to hurl the zookeeper into the lava, which would have meant certain death. Somehow, at the last of his strength, Farnham managed to hang on. Frustrated and furious, Uggup spun around and hurled the zookeeper toward the enclosure in the back of the zoo instead. This time, Farnham felt his grip give. Farnham rolled as he hit the ground, tumbling over and over until he smacked up against the gate in front of the enclosure. He hit it so hard he knocked the hole clean through it. "Farnham!" he heard had to be Micro's voice, but that moment Farnham was too stunned to do more than recognize it. The impact had knocked the wind out of him, and it was all he could do is keep his eyes open and look at Uggup storming after him and finish the job. A pair of hands reached into the hole. Farnham's landing it created grabbed him and hauled him back into the enclosure. What? Farnham didn't understand who had come to help him. What was going on? He looked up to see Micro holding him in their arms, as both she and Grinchard grinned down at him. Before Farnham could even thank you, Uggup slammed right into what was left of the gate and began tearing their way through it. Ooh. So that's going to be a fun chapter next time. And yeah, before we go for the day, we have to figure out how many pages we're reading. We're reading from 203 all the way to the end of the book as I know it. The end of the book that I know to read. 220 feet. 225. So 203 to 225, and that'll be the end. So technically I should use this one, if anything, but it should be fine. But yeah, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. Be polite, be efficient. make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time for the final chapter. Bye bye.